Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, folks, I'm terribly sorry about that. Tommy came in to tell me that the sound was not working. I don't know why. Let me see. For some reason, I'm going to try something real quick. I'm sorry to do this today, but
there you go.
I know. Testing, 1, 2. Okay, there it is. Somehow or another, I apologize. Somehow or another, the sound had been turned off on my microphone. I'm not certain how that happened, but anyway, that is what happened. So, I was trying to explain, and y'all couldn't hear me apparently, that okay, I'm not going to be able to do that today then. I was trying to explain that it is my hope that I'll be able to do our podcast in a much more professional, much more organized manner. I don't want to just get on and rant and go off in 1,000 different directions. I had hoped to be able to do our podcast in this fashion from the beginning. However, when I decided I wanted to start and did the first few, I wasn't able to put things together like I had hoped to and, kind of get things organized. In the future, beginning today, it is my hope that I will have an outline in front of me like I do today that will help me to hit on certain bullet points and at the same time to keep my thoughts organized and allow things to move much more quickly, and hopefully the podcast will not have to take near as much time. I won't have to take as much time doing the podcasts because I will be more organized, okay? And excuse me, I know I feel terrible that y'all are sitting here watching me and I'm still trying to get some things pulled together, but I wanted to start at 5 o'clock today, and I noticed at virtually the last minute, I said, oh my goodness, it is 4:59. So I had to get right on as quickly as I could, and there were a couple of little things I hadn't quite done yet. Okay, I've got my monitor, so if you comment on Facebook or on YouTube, I should be able to see the comments, and I invite your doing so. I'd be happy to have you comment or ask questions, whatever you'd like. And but I want to get started on this podcast today. And I do have my bullet points. This podcast is different than many. As I was saying a moment ago, before Tommy let me know that the sound wasn't working, as I was saying at that time, I am approaching things obviously from a prophetic perspective. That does not mean I claim to be a psychic. That does not mean that I claim to know everything about everything that is happening or that is going to happen. I only know what the Lord shows me when He shows it to me. And it is strictly at His call as to how much He shows me. A lot of times, for instance, I've been talking about prophesying that our nation was going to come to this point and that we were going to go through what I believed to be a change in our form of government. We were, in fact, going to become a dictatorship. I've been talking about that for over 20 years. And however, when the Lord showed this to me, He did not tell me a time frame. He did not say this is going to happen in 20 years or this is going to happen in 10 years or whatever. And I try to be careful not to speculate when God shows me things. There are a couple of times that I have tried to kind of make an educated guess based on the feeling. It's hard for me to describe, but based on what I feel when God shows me many of these things. When the Lord shows me these things, generally speaking, there is a real kind of an urgency and a real, a lot of pressure on me when I'm shown these things. So it feels like they're going to be imminent. Feels like the things he shows me are going to happen tomorrow. I'm sure that John the Revelator, when writing the book of Revelation, probably felt the same way when the Lord showed him the visions in the book of Revelation. John probably felt like, wow, these things are probably going to happen in the next year or two, not realizing that they weren't going to happen for millennium, And when the Lord showed me the trouble that was coming to our nation, the civil war based on race rather than based on the issue of slavery, the change of our government from democracy to theocracy / oligarchy with a figurehead president who in fact is a dictator. When I saw all of this, I did not know, and I told our church basically from the start, I said, I don't know when exactly this is going to happen. I just know that God has shown me that this is going to happen. Then, as we neared the election, after Obama as he was leaving office, the Lord spoke to me and said, as Obama leaves office, all hell is going to break out in this country. And mind you, this was before Trump even announced his run for president. The Lord had told me this, and I told our church in Dallas, I said, folks, as Obama leaves office, I didn't know exactly what that meant, but I said, as Obama leaves office, the Lord has shown me that all hell is going to break out in this country. When Trump announced his run for the Republican nomination for president, I said, this is their man. The plan that I have been prophesying for decades within the Republican Party to ultimately discard our Constitution and establish a new form of government so that the richest of the rich could influence the figurehead dictator and the religious right could influence the dictator. I said, this is happening, folks. And I told the folks in our church, I said, this man is the answer to the Republicans' prayers. They needed someone with immense popularity. And I'll tell you right now, God showed me, and again, I'm going to say, the Lord showed me that they actually were hoping that they were going to be able to do all this while George W. Bush was in office. They were hoping that the Iraq War, that after 9/11, they were hoping that his popularity would soar and that this might allow him to be the man that they could use. In many ways, speaking plainly, George W. Bush was a figurehead president. The man's not very bright. And when you listen to him talk, I was humiliated when he was in office. He was embarrassing when he would make speeches domestically, when he would make speeches on the international scene. He was embarrassing. He would say some of the dumbest things. He just does not come across like a very bright man. He doesn't carry himself as a very bright man. And so anyway, it has been said that Dick Cheney was in fact the president. The problem with Dick Cheney was he had health issues. He's had heart issues for many years. He's still living, surprisingly enough, but he's had heart issues for many years. And the Republicans knew that these issues would probably prevent him from being electable, that people would be fearful to vote for him because, he could drop dead of a heart attack at any time. And so therefore, they made George W. Bush their nominee, and then he named Dick Cheney as his vice president. And I'm going to tell you, Dick Cheney, compared to Bush especially, is a brilliant man, has excellent political discernment from a Republican perspective, mind you, and he certainly embraced a very Republican mindset. And I believe, according to what I feel like the Lord showed me, that while they were hoping that George W. Bush might be their man, he chickened out. He could not see himself doing the dastardly, careless, emotionless, compassionless things that would be required in order to achieve the ends of this plan that was within the Republican Party for decades. And I believe George W. Bush was the man they first wanted to use, but he just couldn't do it. And it's funny because you notice throughout this entire Trump scenario, going all the way back to the campaign of 2015, he has remained strangely quiet. You notice that he doesn't say much of anything. He doesn't say anything for that matter. He's made no commentary. He's made no endorsements. While Dick Cheney came out and said, I cannot support Donald Trump. I'm going to actually cross party lines and vote for Kamala. Mr. Bush refused to make any comment. He refused to say anything. Again, I'm convinced that is because, quite frankly, he is well aware of the plan. I think in many ways he's supportive of it, and he just didn't have the guts to implement it. He just, sat back and let things happen, without weighing in at all. Now, I've said all that to say all this. What we are seeing, the chaos in the Trump administration, the running through agencies, the shutting down of entire agencies, the firing of all kinds of bureaucratic employees, them being demonized and them being told that they're being fired because their performance was not up to par. Folks, this is insane. They're trying to justify what they're doing, claiming that people's performance is poor, and many people are fighting back against that. They're saying, no, sir, I was an excellent employee. My track record was excellent. All of my reviews were excellent, so on and so forth. But this is just the game they're playing in order to run roughshod through our government. I said in previous podcasts, I believe that in keeping with what I have been prophesying for many years, they are dismantling the government. I believe with all my heart, I think we're going to find out after a while that Elon Musk and the computer geniuses that he has working with him, going into all these various computer systems, folks, they have a purpose. They know what they're doing. They are not just there to quote unquote look at stuff. That's not what's going on. Our systems are being sabotaged. I believe with all my heart that we will soon find out that even if you were to try to revive these departments, you're going to find out that their computer systems have crashed and they are irreparable. And this way, Trump and Elon Musk are making certain that these departments that they are doing away with are permanently disabled. And even if you were able to elect someone, which I'm not certain, I don't believe we're going to have that option in 2028, to be honest with you, at the very least, that vote will be rigged as the Russians rig every election they conduct so that Vladimir Putin comes out looking like he's, so popular, winning by humongous margins. If there were an election in 2028, and the Republicans are trying to see if they can't find a way to put Trump's name back on the ballot, can you imagine a man in his 80s running once again for president? And even if they were able to do that, I believe the election would be so rigged, probably following the pattern and the procedures of Russia in rigging elections, so that the Republican candidate would not only win, but would win by surprisingly large margins, which would clue us off. That would be the clue. That should let us know right there that the election is rigged, okay? I'm not certain the last one was not rigged in similar fashion. Frankly, they tried to show Trump as, gaining a lot of support in this demographic and in that demographic, and so many things just don't make sense. And of course, the Republicans challenged millions of ballots, and ultimately millions of provisional ballots were able to be discarded, primarily those of minority voters who most likely would have voted for Kamala. And so in the long run, folks, I am fully convinced that our last election was rigged. And I really believe that with all of my heart. But I want to tell you the chaos and the whirlwind destruction of agencies within our government, it's all part of the plan. None of this is unplanned. And it is not Trump who wrote the plan. I told you what they wanted was a figurehead dictator, okay? They want a dictator, somebody who is so selfish and so mean-spirited and so evil that he is willing to rubber stamp and sign off on whatever these Republicans with this plan put in front of him. He will nominate whatever judges these people with this plan suggest that he nominate. Donald Trump doesn't know the first thing in the world about history, doesn't know the first thing in the world about government, doesn't know the first thing in the world about civics, doesn't know the first thing in the world about political science, and therefore he wouldn't know who to nominate for a judge. He wouldn't know, his backside from a hole in the ground when it comes to any issue, including issues related to the economy, the ecology, the climate, so on and so forth. So basically, he just sits there in the Oval Office. Look at him, I love watching him on television. He just slumps. He sits there with his arms on the desk and just sits there looking like some kind of a slouch. That man never carries himself in a presidential manner. He always looks like some kind of a lazy slouch. That's the image I get every single time I see him. There's a laziness about him. He can't even stand up straight. Every time he stands, he's got this lean going on where he's leaning forward about 6 inches from standing straight, And They wanted, as part of their plan, they wanted a figurehead. Well, Trump's ideal for that. He's ideal for that. As long as he can fill his pockets with cash, as long as he can use the office to profit himself, I believe, honestly, I believe with all my heart, that man would sell us to Russia in a minute if they offered him enough money. I believe that with all of my heart. I'm not sure, and I've been feeling this from day one. I'm not sure that he isn't in fact a Russian spy. You know, that Russia in effect hasn't had him on their payroll for quite a while, and everything he does seems to benefit Russia. You notice, I think they have something on him, the dossier that they spoke about, during the original election, the Russian dossier that Trump, of course, claimed was entirely false and fake and blah, 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 blah. But it claimed that the Russian government and Putin had pictures of Trump with prostitutes in Russia, at some hotel somewhere, and I'm going to speak plainly, as much as it is vulgar and ugly, being peed on by these women as part of some, sexual activity. And apparently Mr. Trump is a freak, as they say. And so I think it's important to understand right now as we see what is happening. Folks, this is all very well planned. You're going to see more and more things happening in a similar vein. And everything they do, they are doing in a specific order. They have it all set up. They have an outline as to how things are to be done. I believe that's why I've said earlier in earlier podcasts, eventually you're going to see media personalities, you're going to see reporters, you're going to see heads of news organizations, you're going to see Democrat political figures being arrested and escorted right off the floor of Congress in the name of Trump will claim that these are enemies within. He will claim that they have some great conspiracy to overthrow his government. And you're going to see some pretty tragic, drastic things that are common to dictators, okay? And so you need to understand that what is happening now, it's all part of the plan. Trump and the new Nazi party are purposely, listen carefully folks, purposely inflicting pain upon the American people. You might say, why would they do that? Why would they be doing things that they know are going to stir the public up to ultimately rebel against him? And why are they trying to make the American public so angry that they are eventually going to be peacefully protesting, but their anger and their frustration will wind up driving some to start looting and becoming violent? And when this happens, and when it happens around the country, and you begin to see violence breaking out from those who are rebelling against Trump and his administration, when you begin to see violence breaking out in various cities around the country, this is their end game. I have been saying this, folks, for years. This is not new. I'm not saying this today as though I have never said it before. No, I've been saying for years that their plan was to drive the public into a state of violence. They want violence to break out. Trump will likely deputize all of various organizations like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, and he will literally claim to have deputized these people, and these people then will go out and in a very violent way they will so-called help to bring order. Of course, Trump will also at that point be able to bring in the National Guard as well as the U.S. Army, although the U.S. Army, by reason of the Constitution, is not ever to be used against the American public. We've seen that Mr. Trump tramples on the Constitution. He has no use whatsoever for the rule of law. He has no use whatsoever for the judiciary or the judicial branch of government. So therefore, he will ignore the Constitution on that matter as he ignores the Constitution on any number of matters. The fact is this: they cannot do what they want to do, which is suspend habeas corpus, as President Abraham Lincoln had to do during the Civil War, declare martial law, that's step number 2, and then number 3, discard the Constitution entirely. This is their end game, folks. This is what they want to do. They cannot do it, listen, until massive revolt springs up around the country and they suddenly they appear justified in doing so. I've got news for you Republicans. Got news for you foolish, stupid people who have allowed yourselves to be pulled around by the nose by a party that is as deceitful as Satan himself. They have done everything in their power to demonize the Democrats, to demonize the liberal point of view. They've done everything in their power to get you to think in this little tunnel vision. They want you only to be able to see in tunnel vision. Anti-gay, anti-abortion. That's all they want you to be able to see. And the religious right has been pulled around by the nose for decades by reason of the use of social issues, culture war. These are areas, folks, that government is not supposed to regulate. Social conduct, the morality of the people, those things are not to be legislated at any level. However, the religious right, through the Republican Party, has made the case and made the argument that, yes, this is indeed part of the responsibility of government. It is not part of the responsibility of our current constitutional republic. No, the Constitution nowhere makes allowance for government to step in and regulate people's morality or their conduct in any way. The only time that government should ever become involved in any kind of regulation relative to behaviors and conduct of individuals is when a party is being damaged by that conduct. Okay? When someone is being hurt, for instance, obviously murder is against the law. Theft is against the law. Why? Because there is a victim in that crime. There is always a victim. Someone suffers harm. Someone suffers loss, be it the loss of their life, be it the loss of their property. These sort of issues obviously fall within the parameters of government involvement. However, what two human beings do in the privacy of their own home ought never, ever to be regulated by government. Government has no business going into an individual's home. And if I dare say, and of course the religious right will be peeing down their leg when I say this, but gay couples, generally speaking, do not consist of a perpetrator and a victim. There is no victim in LGBT living. There is no victim in LGBT relationships. No one suffers loss. As a matter of fact, gay marriage has been legal now in the United States for almost 10 years. And where do we see damage? Where do we see anyone whose marriage has suffered because gay marriage was legalized? Where do we see families crumbling because gay marriage was legalized? Where do we see the nation or the people of this nation being harmed financially or in any other way because gay marriage was legalized? There is no victim. However, the religious right loves to make the argument, that homosexuality is the prelude to the collapse of a society. Honey, you're going to see the collapse of a society, and you're going to realize that the Word of God is true. The Word of God states, the love of money is the root of all evil. What is going to be the destruction, or let me rephrase that, what is the destruction of our democratic republic has been greed. And those of you who have allowed yourselves ignorantly, foolishly, to be led around by the nose by politicians who have laser focused your vision on specific issues, and again I repeat, issues that government has no business even becoming involved in. What a woman does with her own body, for instance, you may believe that morally, spiritually, abortion is wrong. That's all well and good. You can believe that all day long, and I don't know any liberal person who has ever said to me that people don't have the right to believe that. But if you believe that, then you should never seek out an abortion. You should never have an abortion. If it were a sin, if it were a violation in any way of God's law, then those people who pursue abortion will have to answer to God for it. Again, this is where the fundamentalist evangelical church has no concept of respecting boundaries. They have the same mindset that the Roman Catholic Church had for centuries. Centuries, folks. For many centuries, the Roman Catholic Church marched hand in hand with the kings and queens of nations around the world, and they were able to create a theocratic influence, let us say, within those governments, and those governments allowed them leeway to go about doing things like the Crusades and the murdering and torture of people, especially and including Jewish people who would not conform to and accept Roman Catholic teaching. Okay? So, the Inquisitions, that word, for some reason the term Inquisition was escaping my thoughts. So, for hundreds of years, people don't realize, those that don't know history, the Inquisitions, my friend, were supported by popes within the Roman Catholic Church over the course of centuries. We're not talking about something that simply went on for, 10 years or 15 years like the Third Reich, Hitler's Third Reich. It didn't last very long. But it actually was, they were able to do these things in waves over the course of centuries. So far more than one single leader within the Roman Catholic Church rubber stamped the torture and execution of anyone who rejected Roman Catholic teaching and practiced any other faith. So, the plan that I've been speaking up now for years, that has been in place, we finally saw that plan in paper when it was published during this last election cycle as Project 2025. I promise you that that project was in the making long before now, and I'm sure that they have had to change the year on that project many, many times. However, they saw Trump as their best opportunity, the best possible way they would be able to carry out Project 2025 was with a malignant narcissist who has no morality, who has no conscience, who holds no compassion, who is greedy beyond measure. Even in his own book, Donald Trump is quoted as saying, "I don't believe you can be too greedy," which certainly is not in keeping with any kind of Christian teaching. That combination in one human being makes for the perfect figurehead. As long as we flatter him, as long as we sing his praises and worship him, as occurred in the Roman Empire, many of the nations that were conquered by Rome in the ancient world, the leadership in those nations would flatter the Caesars, would flatter the leaders in Roman government, and they would sing his praises in order to get from them what they wanted to get. The second temple, referred to as Herod's temple in Jerusalem, was erected as a political favor of Herod because he felt in doing so, in erecting this temple, that he would be able to secure the praise and the loyalty of the Jewish people. And this is what dictators do. This is how they operate. They do favors for people in order to keep them from revolting. They do favors for certain groups here and there in order to keep them in line. I've got news for you, religious right, and you're not going to like it, but here's a little prophetic word for you. The day is going to come. I don't know how far down the road, but I don't think it's very far. Donald Trump is going to betray you in an enormous way. He no longer has any obligation to you. Anything he does for the religious right at this point in time is to keep the religious right in line. He is not doing it because he believes one single thing that you believe. And you may find pretty shortly that he is going to entirely reverse position on a number of things, and many of the issues that you think are so important, he is going to look at you and say, "I don't see it. I don't feel that way about it. I don't think there's a need to act in that area." And you're going to become very upset that this figurehead you elected is not quite acting in puppet fashion as you had desired he would act. I'm going to tell you something about malignant narcissists. I've talked about this before. I grew up with a father who was a malignant narcissist. I've seen it firsthand my entire life. These people are master manipulators. Master manipulators. They can manipulate like nothing you've ever seen before. They also can sell and market themselves as you have never seen before. I'm going to tell you a little secret. Everybody talks about what a brilliant marketer Donald Trump has been over the years. You know, he's marketed himself, he's marketed his name, created this enormous image of himself, and he's created an entirely false image of himself. I remember reading an article recently about a man who had gone into Trump's office in order to interview him for a book. I may have been the author of Trump's book, The Art of the Deal. And he said that when he went into Trump's office, he said it was... I remember who it was now. It was the producers of the television show, The Apprentice. Originally, they had intended to film on site. They actually intended originally to film Trump in his own office, in his own boardroom, and that was supposed to be part of the show. However, they said when they went into his offices, they were utterly shocked. They said it was shabby. It was not impressive. No, Trump likes to live as a king. He loves to spend money like water. He wants to live with golden toilets, and he wants to live with gilded woodwork. But he does not spend, when it comes to business, he does not believe in investing in his own properties. He does not believe in investing in his own business. All the people that ever worked with him and for him said that if, like managers of buildings said, if they went to him and they said, Mr. Trump, we need to replace the windows in this building. The windows in this building are extremely old. They're fragile. They're falling apart. And these people have come back and said he would not invest the money. He would not do anything. That is why he really, in truth, was very much a slumlord, even going back to the days when his father was still alive. This is the way this man operates. Every dime he makes, he wants to be able to spend. Therefore, he's not interested in investing in his properties. He's not interested in investing in his business. Yet he sold himself, he sold this image of himself as being, this gilded businessman, this golden boy, this Midas, everything he touches turns to gold, unless, of course, it goes bankrupt and he has to close it up because he's unable to keep it going. But we won't talk about that, because there were dozens and dozens of business enterprises that he tried to enter into that failed. And he wound up bankrupt in those business enterprises. He wound up with yachts being repossessed, aircraft being repossessed. This man is a fraud from word go, folks. But he was able to market himself and create this incredible image of himself. I'm going to tell you why he was able to do that. Because he is a malignant narcissist. That's the answer. It is that simple. Malignant narcissists, as a rule, are masters at deception. They can perform better than Julia Roberts. They can perform better than Tom Hanks. They can put on a show in public. They can create an image of themselves that is entirely contrary to who they are and what they are in reality. Those of us that have lived with malignant narcissists, we get to see this. You see this in everyday life. You literally watch it and you see it. And I lived it, so I saw it. So Trump is, as I've said in previous podcasts, he is the perfect man to help the GOP that has had this plan in place for decades to ultimately discard the Constitution entirely and establish, really they want an oligarchy. However, they've been playing footsies with the religious right for so many years that they're willing to allow the religious right a certain amount of influence in exchange for their ability to influence their followers. So it's quid pro quo. As long as we allow you a certain amount of influence in government, then we want you to be our agents in the church, convincing your congregations to support us, to stand behind us. And if you think I'm wrong, just look at the last 8 or 9 years. Or look at the last, maybe not 8 or 9 years. It is actually 8 or 9 years. Look at what they have done and how they have behaved since Trump announced his presidency, all the way through him being elected, him being in office. I cannot say served in office. Donald Trump has not served in office one day of his life. The only interest that Donald Trump serves, as any narcissist, are his own interests. So he has by no stretch of the imagination served the American people in that office. And I told you before, I can't even put the word president and Donald Trump in the same sentence. So I literally will refer to the White House, I will refer to Washington, I will refer to the office, but you don't hear me using that title in conjunction with his name. But this man has the perfect qualities to fulfill what the Republican Party is wanting to do. And what you are seeing now, I repeat, is all part of the plan. I'm sounding a warning, trying to let you know it is going to become so difficult, it's going to become so hard that people are going to have a very hard time remaining faithful to their morality. What I mean by that is this. There are many people in our world, whether they're Christians or not, who believe, thou shalt not steal. And as a rule, they wouldn't steal if their life depended on it, However, when prices go up exponentially, when people are losing their jobs by the tens of thousands, as the economy is tanking and these tariffs on imports are being implemented, there are going to be many people in our country who may have never in their life ever considered stealing, but they will steal then. And frankly, it's kind of like the story in Les Miserables. They're going to do so out of sheer necessity. They're going to, in effect, steal bread in order to feed their family, to feed their children. And so you're going to see a rise in crime. And you're going to see a lot of protest. And the more pressure that Trump and the GOP are able to put on the economy, the more pressure that they're able to apply to the American people, the more likely that these protests will ultimately turn violent. Also, I know, listen, I know people are looking at me. Some people may look at me and think, oh, he's crazy. That's hyperbolic. He's just being an alarmist. That's okay. You think that all you want to. While other podcasters are out there afraid to tell you that Donald Trump is the modern Adolf Hitler. While other podcasts are afraid to read to you from history books and read clearly how Adolf Hitler ascended to the place of a dictator and how he was able to transform the German democracy into a dictatorship. And he was able to lay the groundwork for that change in 53 days. And he only utilized legal means. He worked within the system to dismantle the very system that he was working in. Okay? I've shown the receipts. I've read you articles. I've read you items from history publications. I've gone down the list of the things that Hitler did. I've gone down the list of things that Hitler said. If you read the list of things Hitler said, it's like they handed Trump this book of Hitler quotes, and he used it as a handbook. So, okay, Hitler was able to become a dictator, and these are the tools that he used. And when you read his quotes, all of the tools are laid out. Lie. He said lie. The bigger the lie, the better. He said use propaganda. He said use slogans. Don't spend a lot of time trying to explain any kind of policy or anything. He said, no, the whole idea is you've got to stir up the passions of the masses. And in order to do that, you've got to be able to speak so that the least intelligent person that is listening to you speak is able to understand what you're saying. Donald Trump ran for president, and all kinds of people commented. All kinds of professionals came in, speech therapists and speech experts came on talk shows and talked about the fact that Donald Trump speaks at a fourth grade level. When he's making public speeches, he stands up there and he sounds like, frankly, an idiot, an uneducated moron. And there is a reason that Donald Trump does that, folks. That is exactly what Hitler said to do. He said, you have to speak in a manner that the least intelligent, and that's what Hitler said, person in your audience understands what you're saying. He said, and don't approach people as though they are intelligent. Don't approach people as though they have a mind that they can use to understand things and learn things. He said, no, use slogans. Just use a few words that convey what you're wanting to do. Well, let's see. During election 1, it was lock her up. And then, of course, his main slogan is what? Make America great again. Then we had, during this most recent election, mass deportation now. That was the slogan. You go to his rallies, that's what they had the people chanting. Mass deportation now. You see, that is how Hitler did it, folks. That's exactly how he did it. You read his quotes, and I'm telling you right now, if you don't see Donald Trump in every single stinking quote that I shared online on this podcast, go back. Look at some of my earlier podcasts. I have cut the long podcasts up and divided into smaller segments so that, and each segment I have named according to what that segment deals with. Look up the segment that deals with Hitler quotes being Donald Trump's playbook. I don't want to go through all that again. So, the GOP has had a plan for decades to do exactly what they're doing now. What is happening in our government right now is all part of the plan. None of these things that are happening, none of the repercussions of the things that are happening are accidental. They knew good and bloody well that if they went in and shut down certain agencies, that if they froze certain funding, they knew that many in the American public were going to revolt. They knew that many were going to wind up eventually in the streets protesting. Now, I believe in order to expedite this plan, that they're going to sow agitators in the groups that are protesting. They're going to have people there who are part of MAGA, and they are purposely going to agitate the crowds. They're going to agitate individuals in order to achieve violence. These people may actually be the first to throw, a brick through a store window and take something. And when you have large groups of people like that, unfortunately, there is such a thing in psychology as mob mentality. And somebody sees somebody do something like this, and anybody in that mob who happens to have any proclivity whatsoever toward, stealing and what have you, man, they're going to see that broken window. They're going to say, hey, man, easy opportunity for me to loot, for me to go home with something I can't otherwise afford. And that is their plan. That is what they want. That's what they're looking for. I've been warning since I started my podcast, we need to be extremely careful. I'm going to tell you, and I know people aren't going to like what I'm about to say, and I also know they're not going to do it, but unfortunately, wisdom seldom rules the day. Wisdom would dictate, listen carefully, that we not protest at all. Some of y'all are getting ticked off, say, well, Charles, of course we have to protest. Of course we have to make our voices heard. Of course we have to, no, the wisest thing we could do, if we wanted to thwart the plan that the GOP has, we would not protest at all. Let me tell you a little secret. Your protests mean nothing to Donald Trump. You can protest, and the GOP for that matter, okay? The GOP Senate, the GOP Congress, they could care less about your protests. Your protests don't amount to a hill of beans. I grew up during the Nixon era. Nixon was the first president that I remember. Johnson was president when I was born. But Nixon is the first president that I remember. And I remember protests all day and all night related to the Vietnam War. And it went on for years and years and years. And guess what? Nixon did what Nixon was going to do. And the protests really didn't amount to a hill of beans. They seldom do. These politicians have their own agenda. They have a goal or a purpose. And I'm not even saying that all politicians had evil agendas. I don't mean that. Sometimes they may have had a perfectly reasonable agenda. They were trying to accomplish something that was good and positive for whatever, level. However, the protests of the people do not sway them because they know the ultimate end. For instance, Nixon was trying to get out of the war. He was hoping to be able to withdraw from the war with honor. He was hoping we could win the war in Vietnam. And this way, we would not appear weak before China. Nixon knew long before anybody else in this country knew. Nixon knew. He was a brilliant man. He had an IQ of, I believe I read once, of 175. He was a brilliant man. He knew China was on the rise. He knew that China was ultimately going to be one of our greatest opponents. He knew that China was going to ultimately be one of the greatest economic powers in the world. And the war in Vietnam, for him, had much to do with us as a nation trying to save face in the eyes of China, which was on the rise. Nixon, of course, opened the door to China, which was an act that shocked the fire out of many people. But Nixon understood we've got to make ourselves friendly at some level with these people, because if we don't, they are going to become the next USSR, Russia being the tiny remnant that remains from what used to be the United Soviet Socialist Republic. Nixon knew that China would become a major power, a major player, and a major economic figure, and therefore we had to kind of, warm up to them a little bit. We couldn't afford to maintain the policies that we had maintained for such a long time, where we would not have open dialogue with China. We wouldn't allow for trade with China. He knew we had to change things. So I'm saying, even a politician that isn't trying to overthrow our government oftentimes will ignore the protests, because he knows, he looks out at the crowd and he thinks, folks, I'm with you. I'd love to get out of Vietnam. You have no idea how much I'd love to get out of Vietnam. However, if we do that now, we are going to look like a weak, powerless nation in the eyes of a nation that is quickly going to become a major adversary. You follow what I'm saying? That's a president with an objective that at least makes some kind of sense. When you have a president who is employing policies and doing things like Trump is now doing with the purpose of dismantling our government. Dictators don't want anyone, listen to me carefully, dictators do not want anyone making decisions. They're the final word on everything. Everything. Look at this move Trump made of removing the head of the Kennedy Center and naming himself now, chairman of the Kennedy Center. My God in heaven, how in the universe can anyone who claims, to occupy the office represented by the Oval Office, how in the universe can anyone claim that they're going to have time to be bothered with serving as the chairman? I mean, serving as the chairman of the Kennedy Center is a full-time job all by itself. Literally, folks. This man is literally doing everything Hitler did in order to remove all bureaucracy. Why? Because bureaucracy is expensive and we're wasting money on it, and these programs are a waste of money. Nope, that's not their real purpose. Well, partly it's their real purpose, because ultimately they want every dollar that comes into the Treasury to wind up in their own pockets. And therefore, the more they cut, the less the government has to actually spend, the more money then that is free to give to the oligarchs in order to secure their ongoing support and to give to themselves. So yeah, part of it has to do with enriching themselves, okay? However, the larger part of it is they want to create havoc. I was watching a psychiatrist on YouTube. We have smart TVs here at our house. We don't watch television. We either watch like YouTube or Netflix or Roku TV or Amazon TV. I think we also have Paramount, And so I was watching something on YouTube the other day. There's an Asian woman who is a psychiatrist, and she and many other psychiatrists came out when Trump was first in office, and they said this man is an observable narcissist, and he is immensely dangerous. And they actually wrote a book. They published a book, and it was The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump or something to that effect. And there were like 27 or something prominent psychologists and psychiatrists who were named as contributing to this book. And they all said, this man is an observable narcissist. There are any number of malignant narcissistic traits that, as professionals especially, we see clearly. We observe them. You know, the idea that a psychiatrist or a psychologist would have to have you in their office for an hour a week for a year in order to diagnose you, which is what the Republicans, Trump and his people, MAGA, have tried to say in order to discredit, which is a malignant narcissist's primary go-to. And you see Trump do it every single time. Every time somebody leaves his administration, oh, they were great, they were wonderful, they did a marvelous job, blah, blah, blah. But when they come out and they speak honestly and they say this man is dangerous, General Kelly, for instance, who had served as chief of staff, when they come out and they say, this man is dangerous, I don't ever want to see this man back in the White House, this man should never be in a place of power, he should never be given any kind of authority, he is inept, I have never seen anyone as unintelligent as him, I have never seen anyone as unteachable as him, I have never seen anyone with a shorter attention span than him, I have never seen anyone who dislikes to read as much as him. All of these things are necessary if you're going to serve as president of the United States. Well, when his former staffers and people that were formerly on his cabinet come out and speak against him, what does he do? What does he do? Every single time. Well, they were terrible at their job anyway, and even if they resigned, he tries to suggest that he asked for their resignation. You know, he wants to make it look proactively. He wants to make it look after the fact, like he recognized how lousy they were at their job, and he was instrumental in their leaving, whether they resigned themselves or quit or whatever the case might be. But that is one trait of a malignant narcissist. They go out of their way to discredit anyone and everyone that speaks against them and or exposes them for what they genuinely are. And we've seen Trump do that. This lady was saying on the program I was watching on YouTube the other day, she said, he is getting worse. This situation is growing worse. She said, the scary part of it is a malignant narcissist, their end game is singularly one thing. Take a wild guess at what a malignant narcissist's end game is. What is the one thing they're really terrific at, and the one thing that they strive for and that they seek to achieve? Remember, there's the word malignant in that title, malignant narcissist. She said they are bent on destruction. They love to tear people down. They love to tear anything down. They just love destruction. They love to destroy. Trump is sitting in the Oval Office gleefully watching Musk go through all these agencies and annihilate them. And he is seeing himself as this great big, powerful figure, because look at what I'm able to do. I'm able, with the signing of a document, I'm able to have all these enormous organizations destroyed. I'm able to put 10,000 people out of work with signing a document. That's all it takes. And I'm able to do this. And because he is a malignant narcissist, he tells them that, well, you're being let go because your job performance was bad. Mind you, this same letter goes to all 10,000 people. So apparently the government, according to him, had an agency with 10,000 inept employees. And again, this is the garbage that he peddles to the public, and his idiot followers believe him. None of these people are good, solid, decent people that love America, with a desire to help people, with a desire to do good on behalf of our nation. None of these people, if you look at it from a human perspective, none of these people have families that they're trying to support. None of these people have mortgages that they have to pay. None of these people are making car payments. None of these people are supporting elderly loved ones who have memory issues, Alzheimer's and what have you, and they're in memory care facilities, and these people are trying to support them. None of these people have sick loved ones, children with cancer, spouses with cancer, so that losing their job by reason of literally being fired, they lose their benefits, they lose everything. They lose their future pension, they lose everything. And yet there are Trump supporters who stand there and cheer as he does these things. Because after all, the man is an idiot. I'm sorry, folks. I don't mince words. I don't have time to mince words. If I got something to say, I'm going to say it. The man's an idiot, okay? Their plan is destruction. The GOP wants to dismantle our government. Trump loves destruction, so he's happy to go along with this plan. If we were dealing with an intelligent man who had a desire to work within the framework of our Constitution and to do things lawfully and legally, then he might approach things in a much more intelligent way. He might find a way to thin out the bureaucracy. He might find a way to thin out the workforce, but to do it in a manner that is humane. To do it in a manner that does not simply put people out in the cold overnight. For instance, he could have at least issued a notice to these people that we will be shutting this department down. You have 90 days notice, or you have 180 days notice, which would have given people an opportunity to go out and seek, future employment while they were still employed, so they can still pay their mortgage, they can still pay their rent, they can still pay their car payment, they can still pay for mom at the memory care facility, they can still have benefits to provide health care for their loved one. This is what could have been done. But you notice it wasn't. No. He marched in like a bull in a china shop and just started destroying. Trump gets a lot of malignant, narcissistic joy from doing people dirty. There's something in a malignant narcissist, folks, and I'm telling you, if you lived with my father as his child, you would have seen this kind of behavior. There's something about getting over on people. There's something about, being able to just, man, I really got over on them. That thrills malignant narcissists. They love that. And so Trump is looking at it like, look at this. I'm standing here and I'm able to claim that I'm saving the government all this money. I'm able to sell this to my supporters that I'm saving the government all this money. And not only am I saving all these salaries that we're paying, but I'm saving having to pay out in pensions. I'm saving and having to provide any kind of benefits. Boy, man, did I do this. I did this in a way like nobody else could ever do it. Of course you did, because you're destructive by nature. You have no conscience. Malignant narcissists literally have no conscience. You have no compassion. You couldn't care less. You have no empathy, which is, again, a major trait of a malignant narcissist, or a narcissist, period, malignant or otherwise. They have no empathy. They cannot feel for other people. They have no feelings for other people. The only people they feel for, literally, are themselves. Growing up as a kid, I remember my mother going to my father, for instance, and saying, I got word today that so-and-so died. And it could be somebody that my father knew very well, that he interacted with regularly, so on and so forth, that he acted like he liked and that he put on his big performance for, so he came across like Mr. Nice Guy. And my father would literally look at her and say, oh yeah? And then he'd turn around and walk away. That man never one time, not one time, did I ever see him respond with any level of empathy when you told him about calamity that struck others, when you told him about deaths, when you told him about news of sickness, a loved one has cancer, even his own siblings. You can tell him that, your sister has cancer, your brother has cancer, looks like he's not going to live very long, And my father's reaction would be, oh yeah? Just like that. Oh yeah? Go on about his business. You never once saw him stand there go, and even act like he gave a care. No. Part of his shtick was, I'm a strong man. I'm macho man. I'm not moved by anything emotionally. I'm not affected by anything. And that was part of his malignant narcissistic personality. And that's how he behaved with us. He could put on an act like he was crying his eyes out. Oh, don't think for a minute my father couldn't put on an act. And there are some people out there who probably have witnessed him putting on this big boo-hoo. But I'm going to tell you, as his son growing up in his house, he could put on an act, folks, that would win an Academy Award. And then he could walk into his house and be by himself and turn that mess right off in a half a second. Because it was all a show. He was only doing it in order to make people pity him or make people feel sorry for him. That was it. Because narcissists also love to be the victim. They are constantly the victim. Growing up as a kid, my father, everybody hated him. Everybody was against him. At his job, they've been trying to fire me for years. They've been trying to get rid of me. Yet at the same time, he always claimed, of course, like Trump, that he was the best employee that any company ever had. That he did every job he ever did better than anybody else on the planet could do it. But everybody was against him. And he did not let his family go anywhere near if he could help it. His family members, he did not want us hearing anything about him from people that knew him. His brothers, his sisters. Growing up as a kid, my mother used to take us to visit Aunt Arlene and my cousins David and Tracy. And we would play with them. They lived relatively close to where we lived in this little town in Connecticut. And we would go and we would spend some time with them because my father would be at work and my mother could do that while he was at work. Occasionally we'd go visit our Aunt Velma and my Uncle George and their kids on occasion, not real often, but on occasion. My mother, that is, would bring us. It was more rare, but on occasion we might be able to visit with my Aunt Shirley and her husband Walter, my Uncle Walter. I loved all these people. I loved every one of them. I wanted to know every one of them. All of my aunts and uncles. My father had 11 siblings. My mother had 9. So I had 20 immediate first aunts and uncles, okay? And I would have loved to have known. I've got aunts and uncles on my father's side of the family that to this day, the only thing they know about me is what my father has told them about me. And my father has never spoken a good word about me in his life. Not one time. You talk to my father about me, and all he will do is try to destroy me. All he will do is try to make you believe that, I am untrustworthy, that I'm a liar, that I'm this, that I'm that. He does that because over the years I've spoken out, and I've exposed some of the garbage that he pulled when I was young, and he knows it. And so therefore, in order to cover his tracks, in order to convince people that my testimony as to his actions is untrustworthy, he paints me to be this big liar and fraud and, all kinds of negative things. And I've grown up with this, folks. I've lived with this my entire life. When I was pastoring my first church, my father went around the community that I was pastoring in, which was a town right next door to the town that I grew up in. And our town was so small, we had very little business in our town. So we would have to travel either south to Seymour or north to Naugatuck to do a lot of our business, because those towns were much, much, much bigger. They had a lot of business, restaurants, stores, etc., department stores, and so on and so forth. We were lucky to have a convenience store, and we didn't have a lot of business in our town. And I started my first church in Seymour, which is the one town south of the little town I grew up in. My father, his family all lived in Seymour. They were all from Seymour. And up until the time I started my first church, I had been in my grandparents' home, his parents' home. I had been there maybe 4 times in total. I started my first church at 19 years old. As a kid, there were like maybe 3 or 4 times that my father took us over there, but usually it was because we were out and we were doing something and he needed to stop, for instance, and ask his father a question or ask his father to help him with something, and he'd stop. And a lot of times he'd say, y'all stay in the car. He didn't even want us to get out of the car. I knew who my grandparents were until I was 19 years old, basically by sight. In other words, if I saw them, I obviously recognized them. But if I tried to talk to them, I felt so uncomfortable. I felt so out of place. I didn't know them. They were literally strangers to me. Well, while I was pastoring my first church, I finally decided, I said, Chuck, you're old enough. If you want to know your grandparents, you can know your grandparents. Your father has no more say. It's not a matter of he can demand that you not go to their home, And so I began to visit my grandparents. And I'm going to tell you honestly, folks, I kid you not, the first probably 24 times I would go on holidays, Christmas, anytime. I was living in when I pastored my first church, I was living in that community, so I would go by more often. In later years, when I moved to New York City, it was a 2-hour train ride to go back to my hometown, and or if I drove, it was about a 2.5 hour drive. And I would always, every time I went to Connecticut, wherever I was living, if I lived in Texas and I flew up, if whatever, I would always go by and visit them because I wanted to make a concerted effort to get to know them, because my father made certain that we never spent any time around my grandparents, none at all. And over the years, I thank and praise God that the Lord allowed me to actually develop a very meaningful relationship with my grandparents. And when my grandmother wound up later in life breaking her hip, and she already had one bum leg, and when she broke her hip, it basically immobilized her entirely. She had to go into a nursing facility. And my grandfather drove every day to spend time with her, But when I went to Connecticut, when I lived in Connecticut for a while, even during my progressive LGBT affirming ministry, I lived there in Connecticut for like a year and a half, whatever it was. And when I lived there, I went and visited them. Matter of fact, with my grandmother being in the hospital, I would bring covered dishes. I would cook, and I would bring something to my grandfather every once in a while so he could have something homemade, because my Aunt Cindy had told me that, bless his heart, he doesn't know how to cook, and he doesn't, he just eats, I think, basically frozen dinners, that sort of thing. So I would make him stuff I knew he liked. I knew he liked baked macaroni and cheese. I knew he liked baked chicken. Certain things I knew he enjoyed. And I'd bring it to him. And God blessed me, because I adore my father's parents. And I am so grateful for the relationship that I was able to establish with them before they died. But malignant narcissists, this is their whole game, folks. They only want you to know about them what they want you to know about them. This is why Trump tries to discredit every news agency that ever publishes anything that exposes anything negative about him. That is what a malignant narcissist does. It's not like he just says, no, those aren't the facts. That's not the way it went. No, he didn't say that. He has to demonize the entire publication. The New York Times, that paper's going down and it's lying, and boy, they're on the decline. And isn't it funny how every single news agency, every single broadcast, organization on earth, every single one of them that has ever said or allowed anything to be said contrary to Trump, isn't it funny how they're on the decline? They're on their way out. They're going out of business. Their circulation has been going down. The man just lies and tells lies and tells lies. And my father would do the same exact thing. And lie and lie and lie and demonize your enemy. Try to make their credibility be questioned so that no matter what they say. And then Trump did an interview with one lady, I can't remember who it was, Leslie Stahl or whoever it was, in which he literally said that I discredit the press so that if and when they say anything negative about me, people won't believe it. He literally said that. Go look it up on the internet, and you will be able to find that this is on record. He literally said those words. So he admitted to this tactic, okay? So everything that is happening in our world right now, in our nation right now, is very much part of the plan, okay? Know that. It's part of the plan. They know what they're doing. I want to talk for just a quick minute. You may have seen how the Canadians were booing the American national anthem, hockey fans in Montreal, Canada. There was a game Saturday, February 15th, this last Saturday, And when the American national anthem was being sung, the Canadians booed so heavily that you literally could barely hear the man singing the anthem. Donald Trump is quickly, folks, turning the entire world against us. He's creating an evil and a bullying image of the United States. He's enabling and supporting both genocide and ethnic cleansing. Listen, not only in our own country, not only is he wanting to get rid of every brown, black person in America so this can be a lily white nation, but by the same token, he supports such policies in other countries as well. And this is why he talks about taking over the Gaza Strip and sending all the Palestinians to other countries. The Palestinians for centuries, folks, like it or lump it, lived in what is today called Israel. Okay? And it is insane. That's like saying that the Pilgrims came to America and they then proceeded to ship all of the American Indians, the Native Americans, I should say, from American soil to Canada and Mexico. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? But Trump believes in and supports the concept of ethnic cleansing. He also has no issue with with genocide. And I tried to warn you. I tried to tell people before he went into office the first time. I said, folks, I've been saying, this man is the revived Adolf Hitler. You think I'm kidding? You think I'm being hyperbolic? That's okay. And I said, when he went in the first time, I said, he will embrace and employ policies that purposely will kill tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Americans. He has no empathy. He has no compassion. He has, folks, no conscience. He is a narcissist and a malignant narcissist at that. When COVID came, Donald Trump took actions and did things that, from the standpoint even of the rest of the world, was insane. This man stood there as the leader of a nation and lied to the public, telling them, oh, this isn't anything to worry about, it's gonna pass, blah, 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 blah. Like he didn't have scientific and medical experts who were able to advise him and educate him as to the truth on these matters. You're going to tell me that there was no one around him that was able to tell him the truth? Of course there were. And he still went out in front of the public and told them whatever he wanted to tell them. And I told you, I said, this man is going to employ policies that are going to amount to what I refer to as legal genocide. What do I mean by that? In other words, it's going to kill people that they want to kill. Who did the Nazis want to kill? The sick, the feeble, the disabled, the retarded, the elderly. Anyone who fell into those categories, according to Nazi ideology, were useless to society. And therefore, they would exterminate them. They have no use for them. If you're sick and you cannot work in a factory, if you can't help build the machinery of war, the instruments of war, then you have no value to our society. According to Hitler, it was all about the survival of the fittest. He said, if you're not fit, if you're not able to survive and care for yourself, then why on earth should we try to keep you alive? That's insane. He said, no, the weak, the elderly, the sick, They need to die because it's their time to die. Nature, and this is what Hitler said, folks. He said, nature has determined that you should not live. Therefore, who are we to go against nature? And by going against nature, according to Hitler, you were polluting and diluting your own race. He said, keeping these people alive and allowing these people to be part of our society, in the end, all we're doing is hurting our own race. So, Donald Trump is employing policy. He already did away with U.S. aid. U.S. aid was such a tiny part of the American budget that, frankly, it's embarrassing. But the primary objective of USA was to provide funds for poor nations, struggling nations around the world, to do everything from dig wells to establish medical clinics, things of this nature, to provide vaccines, to provide medical care, so on and so forth. The first thing he did was go to the smallest department in our government and literally shut it down. And now America is doing nothing for anybody by way of charity, by way of showing compassion. We are the richest, the most powerful nation on the face of planet Earth. And what Donald Trump is doing is he is making our national image after his own image, which is greedy, uncaring, unfeeling. And the world is seeing this. And this is why the Canadians booed our hockey team as they went to Montreal to play against the Canadian team. I also want to just talk real quickly about, I think I'm going to do that on another podcast. I'm trying to keep this short today. I'm not going to go more at the extreme, most 2 hours, all right, which is another 20 minutes and I'll be done. So I don't want to go any further than that. Okay, on another point, Trump and Musk are speaking of aggressively going after the press that does not comply with his mandate to treat him fairly. Trump and Musk are talking of removing judges who issue judgments not in keeping with Trump's agenda. So it's not at all about trusting the judiciary to do its job, which is to interpret and to define the terms of our Constitution. No, if Trump disagrees with it, then it's wrong, period. And if some judge who spent years in law school studying law and studying the Constitution of the United States of America, many of them minoring in political science and government, these people who know the Constitution, they understand the Constitution, they know exactly what it says, and furthermore, why it says that. No, these people don't know anything, according to Donald Trump. Therefore, if they rule against him, if they rule against his actions and his agenda, now they are talking aggressively, folks, about removing people in federal benches simply because they rule against Trump and his agenda. You think that they are not dismantling our government and ultimately seeking to suspend our Constitution? Well, you keep thinking that. You think that all you want to. You can believe this old preacher's full of malarkey. You can say I'm alarmist. You can say that, it's all hyperbole. Doesn't matter to me. I'm issuing the warning. I'm doing my job. Okay? I'm also hoping that I'm offering exactly what I say in the title of my podcast. I'm trying to offer a voice of reason in turbulent times. I'm trying to give you information, hopefully, that will help you to employ reason, that will help you to think, to look at things and actually reason it out and think, why on earth would they do this? Is what they're saying compatible with what they're doing? Or is there something smelling a little fishy here in Denmark? Does something smell fishy? When you take the richest man in the world at your inauguration, you surround yourself with the richest people in your country. You decide that even though every inauguration from Washington till present has been performed outdoors in January, oftentimes in the most inclement weather, and this was done on purpose so that the population, the citizenry, could come and participate in what is an historic event. Regardless of who is being sworn in, the fact of the matter is it is a part of history. And many people went to Washington. People that were not rich, people that were not influential, went to Washington so that they could be there for this demonic dictator's inauguration, so they could be there for the beginning of the end of our republic. And these people love him, they support him, they voted for him, they probably gave money to help his campaign. And Donald Trump said, no, I don't want to be out in the cold. I don't want to be out in the cold. No, let's just do this indoors. And who does he surround himself with? Well, of course, the politicians. Because the politicians, the senators, the congressmen, the Supreme Court, they're always present. Former office holders are traditionally present. Why? Well, having these people there makes you look important, makes you look like, wow, you're the top of the cake, baby. You're the all in all. And so he, of course, had those people there. But interestingly enough, who does he have literally standing around him? But those who will be shortly clearly known as American oligarchs, the richest of the rich. Donald Trump, my friend, has never been the richest of the rich. He is nowhere near as rich as many people in this country. As a matter of fact, the Democratic governor of the state of Illinois is also a billionaire. And he's worth about $4 billion himself. He's a Democrat. He's been a wonderful governor in Illinois. He cares about people. He has empathy. He has compassion. He tries to help the people of Illinois. He tries to care for the people and provide for the people of Illinois. So I'm not saying you can't be rich and not have empathy and not care and not, of course you can. There are those that do. But he's got as much money as Trump is said to have had when he was elected. Trump was supposed to be, he claims, worth about $4 billion. $4 billion is way under the former mayor of New York City, whose name escapes me at the moment. He ran for president. He tried to get the Democratic nomination this last time around, and for whatever reason, I can't think of his name, but the former mayor of New York City. He is far wealthier. There are any number of billionaires in this country who are far, far, far richer. Those that stood on that platform with Trump are far richer than he is. I mean, by 100-fold or more. And he wants to surround himself with these people because he wants people to believe that he is one of them. And he is going to use the government. He is going to grift. He is going to steal. He is going to pull every scam he can pull, just like he did the first time around. And those that support him act like they didn't see it. Oh, I didn't see him renting rooms to figures from other nations, political figures from other nations, and dignitaries from other countries. I didn't see him renting rooms to them in his hotels for exorbitantly ridiculous amounts of money. It's not what they normally would pay. That's not what you or I would pay if we wanted to rent that same room. But this is how he was able to take bribes. This is why everybody that supports him says, oh, Donald Trump gave up so much. Oh, so that he could come and he could save our nation. He gave up so much. Folks, you're not very bright. You really are the dimmest bulb on Broadway. I'm going to tell you right now. He never divested himself of his businesses, as other presidents have done. He never put his financial interests in a blind trust, as other presidents have done. Oh, no, not at all. So the whole time he's in office, there were 1,000 ways that foreign entities could funnel money to him in order to garner favor with him. And they did. And he's going to continue doing this, I can assure you of that. But in the process, he is literally trying to mold the judiciary in his own image and annihilate all free press in favor of a press that will only help to spread mega propaganda. He wants no dissension to be permitted. Well, no dictator ever has allowed for dissension to be permitted. The GOP screams that conservatives are being censored on various social media platforms and so on and so forth. And yet they simultaneously scream at every opportunity about those who publish or express liberal opinions and speak of the need to shut them down or silence them. You know, isn't it funny how that this Episcopal bishop, this woman, could speak at the inaugural service on Inauguration Day that the presidents have always attended, elected presidents have always attended. Trump attends this service, and this one Episcopal bishop who participated in the service made a plea to him to please be merciful, to show compassion for certain people in our nation, certain people in our communities, transgendered people, LGBT people. Well, I'm sorry, I happen to fall into that group. I'm sorry, I happen to appreciate very much this woman taking probably the only opportunity she will ever have to have the ear of the newly elected occupant of the White House, and she took that opportunity to make a compassionate plea on behalf of vulnerable people whom the religious right has been after and attacking for decades. And she is immediately demonized. She is immediately attacked by everyone from politicians in Washington to the grassroots mega supporters for having said things that, by the way, were every bit in keeping with Christian teaching and biblical principles. Nothing she said was outside of the perimeters of her authority, outside of the perimeters of her job description. No, this lady was simply representing Christ and representing Christian teaching and Christian values. And yet, members of Congress who have the gall, I'll use the word gall, to claim that they believe the Bible and that the Bible informs every decision they make. These men have the gall to decry and denounce this woman. And then Donald Trump, in classic narcissistic fashion, demonized her, came against her, accused her of attacking him. Because after all, she stood up there and said, "You are a godless heathen. You are a immoral, amoral, evil man." No, she never said any of those things. She never even suggested those things. She simply knew, based on the platform he had run on, she simply knew, based on the positions that he had voiced during the course of the campaign, as well as his previous administration, she knew where he might go politically. She knew the influence the religious right has in bending his ear. And as a representative of a more liberal branch of the Christian faith, she wanted to represent that position. And she wanted to make a plea to him that he might have mercy and be gracious to these people and think carefully about any decisions he might make that would affect these people's lives. And Donald Trump goes out and immediately says, it was a bad service. It wasn't a good service. I didn't enjoy it, And then he has the nerve, as a misogynist, he says, that so-called bishop. Okay, so she does something that is in perfect keeping with her position. She does something that is within perfect keeping of her involvement in this service. She does something that is in perfect keeping with her faith and representing her faith as the leader of her faith. And all of a sudden, Trump comes along and he alludes to and suggests that her bishopric, her position as bishop, is perhaps not even legitimate. She's probably not even really a legitimate bishop. Folks, I'm here to tell you, I would not vote for a human being that has this man's qualities if my life depended on it. I could not compromise my personal spirituality. I could not compromise my morality. I could not do it. I could not vote for looking at that man as he ran for president and watching him demonize groups of people, immigrants, watching him demonize those that were here illegally, many of which escaped countries where there was great violence and there was tremendous economic troubles. They came here not rapists, not murderers, not seeking to kill and murder and steal. That's all hyperbole and garbage that Trump peddled again in order to justify his actions toward them. You notice when he's going to do people dirty, whoever they may be, he always starts by demonizing them. Because in the ears of his idiotic followers, demonizing them justifies then his bad acts. Okay? So here's a bishop, a woman who has served in the Episcopal Church for decades, who has worked, and I'm going to tell you, as an apostolic Pentecostal preacher, I'm going to tell you, it breaks my heart to have to say this, but the Episcopal Church has traditionally always acted with far more compassion and far more charity than any fundamentalist or evangelical church I have ever known. The Episcopal Church has always fed the hungry, sought to house the homeless, to help those who were addicted to drugs and alcohol. The Episcopal Church has, I lived in New York City 10 years, and I'm going to tell you, I saw firsthand a soup kitchen that one Episcopal church in Manhattan ran. It was utterly amazing. I kid you not. It had the most beautiful restaurant-equipped kitchen. They had a beautiful dining room. All of this was created for homeless people. They treated those that came in, they served them with such compassion and such grace, with such kindness, with such hospitality. They had people, as if you were in a restaurant, that came around table to table offering to refill your drink and so on and so forth. I never saw anything like it in my life. I have known a number of Episcopal ministers in my life growing up. My mother's, one of her best friends was the daughter of an Episcopal minister. Do I agree with their doctrine? No. Do I believe that they have the fullness of the light that God has given us in these last days? No, I do not. But do I believe that they genuinely understand and embrace and try to practice Christian charity and demonstrate love and grace and kindness? Absolutely. And by far, the Episcopal Church does a much better job than any fundamentalist or evangelical church that I have ever known. And I've preached in hundreds of them, so believe me, I've known quite a few. All right, folks, I have taken 2 hours and I'm going to stop here, okay? I told you in the future, I'm going to try even harder next time because I didn't even do quite as well this time as I had hoped to do. But I'm going to try real hard to have an outline that I'm working with so that in the future, I may even be able to do shorter podcasts, maybe keep it, within an hour. I don't want to bore you. I don't want you to be bored to death, but I hope something that I'm saying strikes a chord in your hearing and that it helps you. Again, all I want you to do is be able to watch what's happening and think critically, think independently, use reason. That's all I would encourage you to do. All right, till we see you again, and God willing, tomorrow I'll be able to do another podcast. Till I see you again, as always, God bless you in Jesus' name.